What's up, everybody? Let's get Ryan in here. There he is.
Gary,
Hey, what's up, guys? Good to see y'all.
what's going on, man? What's the latest?
Man, I've been kind of messing around a lot, so I haven't had really good focus. So I'm just trying to get back on track. March was a lot of playing in Mexico, so now I'm back on task.
Oh man, do you drive any more monster trucks?
Yeah, just last week I'm still sore from it. We had a race on Saturday. It was a blast. So a lot of heating pads and and ibuprofen going on right now. I got a pretty steady diet. So, but now I'm ready to get serious again.
Getting back into it. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Awesome.
How's it going on your end?
It's good. It's going very good. With this petrodollar topic, I'm going all in on oil, man. I got a $5 million commitment, soft commitment this weekend. So
Oh man, congrats. That's awesome. I love it. You're in a great industry.
yeah, thank you. Boom. Let's just wait just a couple more minutes. How's it going, Marty?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Sweet.
Hey, Gary, was that San Felipe you were racing?
Yeah, it sure was. It was the Baja 250. Racing in Mexico is fantastic. I mean, just the whole city's into it. I mean, everybody's into it. And it was a rough course.
Nice.
Were you
Russell.
class 10 or something else? Where were you guys in?
Racing a spec trophy truck.
Oh, okay. 6,100.
Yeah, exactly. It was a huge turnout. There was 43 trucks in our class, which usually it's not quite that big, but it was really competitive. But we made it 105 miles before the motor mounts tore out and everything. It was rough. So we didn't finish, but we had a good time.
Nice.
Yeah, San Felipe is brutal. That one's a rough track.
Yeah.
All right, guys. I think let's go ahead and hop into it. So I'm super excited for today's call. I've got a few announcements before we get into it. So Stockton had this great idea about actually posting these calls, the recordings, into like a mini series. So if people can't make the call because you're busy or working or whatever, we're going to be able to, you're going to be able to come back and look at these videos if you miss something. So I think that's super awesome. I don't know the details of that, so where that'll be, that'll get figured out. But with that being said, disclaimer, this is not financial legal advice. And we're just here the intention of this call is to just be educational, right? To help people get their funds off the ground. So, I like to give a quick recap of last week. Multiple people reached out to me and actually sent me some of their legal docs. And we realized that, hey, some of the things that were going on were not really okay with some of the legal docs. And that's why I only work with legit guys like Marty. So in the fund launch formula, we got the deal expert, the fund manager, and the capital raiser. So last week we talked about the capital raiser. And a quick recap, the broker dealer laws are no joke. So if you want to compensate somebody for raising capital, there's really two general rules. One, the compensation cannot be success-based. And two, the compensation cannot be a percentage of the capital raised. So also in that video, we went over some details on strategies on how to compensate somebody and details on having your Series 63 or Series 7 license. So that was a pretty good call. If you missed it, it'll be posted. So for those that don't know me, my name is Ryan Working. I'm 4th generation oil and gas. I buy oil rigs and plug wells. I also buy oil field interests in Texas. I've raised capital through Reg CF, a Reg D 506C, and a Reg A plus. I passed my Series 65 in 3 weeks, and at one point was possibly the youngest chief compliance officer with the SCCRA in the country, maybe, not sure. So I worked with Marty. We put together the first oil and gas Reg A plus ever, which is pretty exciting. So just quick intro to Marty. When I think of legal counsel as like a strategic partner on my team. So I'll read the SEC laws and I think I know what's going on. And then I'll talk with Marty and he'll say, you know, that's what it says, but in reality, this is the best practice. So it's really awesome to use and leverage their experiences and on the best path forward. So they're really an advisor to the team. So I don't go off on any new adventures without running things by Marty. So Marty, can you, for the new folks on the call, could you just give a background on what you've done and what your firm does?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Marty Tate. I'm a 20 plus year securities lawyer. Have been on both sides. I've been on the fund side as a general counsel and managing partner for a fund management company called Harbor Capital, where we managed over $200 million in funds. We had offshore funds, we had a venture capital fund, we had a real estate fund, we had an equity fund. So that's how I got started sort of in the fund field. In 2009, when the real estate market collapsed, I was left with the real estate funds, which wasn't ideal. So we worked through that and I went back into private practice. And since that time I've advised and worked on, over 100 different funds, helping them structure their funds. These funds have been everything from real estate funds, venture funds, quant funds, Forex funds, digital asset funds, kind of you name it. Around that same time, I was also involved with an early adopter of crowdfunding. I got involved with the drafting of the Jobs Act and have been one of the kind of national leaders of in the crowdfunding space since the passage of the Jobs Act, and have helped clients do not only do 506C offerings, but Reg CF and Reg A offerings as well. So right now my practice focuses mainly on those areas.
Awesome. Thanks, Marty. So this week, what I wanted to do was hop into, you got the deal expert, the capital raiser, and this week I wanted to hop into the fund manager category. And specifically, I wanted to hop into what is an exempt reporting advisor. And I know it's a big topic, and I went through all the videos that through the fund launch program. It really talked about, RIAs and having different arms and structures and having a Series 65 license to charge a management fee. And there's something called an exempt reporting advisor that I thought would be really valuable to the group. So that's kind of the topic for today on what it is and kind of how it works. I'll give a couple examples too. So Marty, just to kick off, what is an exempt reporting advisor?
So an exempt reporting advisor is basically, and it's an exemption from the general rule, which is a registered investment advisor. It's a, I guess it would basically be a, you're still required to register with the SEC, but it's not a fully reporting licensed investment advisor, and it kicks in certain circumstances, especially with regards to private funds and venture capital funds.
Got it. So when you have a smaller fund, like let's say less than 25 million, Marty, kind of how does that work with like state regulations? And do different states have different sets of laws when it comes to these private fund exemptions? How does that work?
So they do, and you and I have had lots of conversations about this, and it's not as clear cut. Even I've been dealing with this issue for over a decade, and even in my mind, it still can be a fuzzy issue. There's basically different depending on sort of the who, when, what, why, and how. So and how much, I guess, will determine the licensing requirements for the advisors of a fund. And typically, that the first thing that looks at is what type of fund is it, and that can be not only the asset class, but what exemption you're using for to avoid licensing under the Investment Company Act, so 3C1 or 3C7. But it also looks at the amount that you have of assets you have under management. So kind of a quick, I'll just give a quick synopsis and we can go into this. But if you have assets under management of under 25 million, there's no registration required with the SEC, and you are eligible to file, a truncated Form ADV with to be an exempt reporting advisor, but that is filed with the state, right? So that you would register with the state only, and that's typically the state where you are, where your principal office is.
Marty, can I jump in real quick?
Uh-huh.
Yep. So just as an example, I live in Colorado, right? And so Colorado has unique rules, and I pulled up an example real quick. So typically, if I want to set up an ERA in Colorado, is that working? Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yep. Typically, so if I want to set up an ERA in Colorado, I can only work with, it's called a Colorado Private Fund Advisor Exemption. And I can only work with 3C1 or 3C7 funds. And if it's a 3C7 or 3C1 fund, I can only work with qualified venture capital funds or private equity or private funds. And one of the caveats with Colorado is the investors, if it's a 3C1 fund, I cannot accept funds from accredited investors. They actually have to be a qualified client, which is a higher threshold. I think it's like a $2 million net worth or something like that. So
yeah, $2.2 million net worth or $1.1 million assets under management with that advisor is the new qualified client definition. So Colorado follows it's the National Association of State Advisor Association, I forget, NASAA regulate model rule for exemption for investment advisors, which is just that. It basically says that if you are a private fund advisor, you're exempt from registration, and that registration as an investment advisor. So long as you meet the requirements, which is you're either advising for a qualified venture capital fund, or you're qualifying for a 3C1 fund that only deals with qualified clients. So that's, that can be tricky, right? Because again, you're not even talking about accredited investors. We're talking about sort of super accredited investors. Also the income, there's no accompanying income qualification for qualified clients. It's just a net asset.
So Marty, how about, let's say you cross that $25 million threshold, or you plan to. What does it look like when you register with the SEC?
So, and before we kind of get into that, it's that 25 million, you're still not able to register with the SEC unless you have $150 million of assets under management. Or there is another sort of backdoor way, which is the multi-state qualification. If you will have clients in more than, Ryan, and you might need to refresh me on this, is it 15 or is it 25 states?
It's 15
Okay.
states. Yeah.
That's what I thought. So that is one way that you can do it, even if you don't have assets under management. That was, an approach that you took initially when you were federally licensed as an investment advisor, because you anticipated having clients in more than 15 states within 6 months.
Yeah. I also have an example of an SEC registered ERA. I'm going to share my screen real quick. We know this fund, and this is a really cool tool, guys. I just want to share this with you. Before I make investments into other different ventures, I usually do a check. If they're charging a management fee, I do some due diligence. This is one of my tricks. So I go to this brokercheck.com to see if people are legit. And so we've heard of this ugly unicorn fund before, right? So this is the management arm of Bridger's fund. So you can come in here and pull up anybody's information, right? So this is their form ADV. And what Bridger did was he's got this SEC reporting by exempt reporting advisors. So he qualifies exemption from registration to private funds using this Rule 203M-1. Great. He's also got, what is it? All right, so there's the entity, and he's using the 3C1 exemption, which is great. Quite a lot of valuable information too. So, right, the minimum is 100,000. They've raised a little over 11 million at the time of this filing. So that's a tool I use to help do due diligence. But that's another way. So, and Bridger, I don't think has a Series 65. He was able to set this ERA up with the SEC, and another way to go about it.
Yeah, and so that's interesting to look at. One of the things that as we were talking before, so again, this exemption from registration for an exempt reporting advisors is only available if you advise a venture capital fund, which there's a definition for that. And some states actually vary in their definition. California has a different definition. But it's basically you have to invest in qualifying venture capital investments. There are restrictions on the amount of leverage that you can use. There are restrictions on the ability of a client to make redemptions. There's 4 or 5 qualifications to meet as a venture capital fund. The other is a private fund. And a private fund is basically a fund that is exempt under the Investment Company Act, under 3C1 or 3C7, 3C1 being less than 100 investors, 3C7 meaning it's a qualified client or qualified purchaser fund, sorry. So those are the 2 qualifications for an exempt advisor. If you have $25 million or more, you can meet this exempt reporting advisor and by filing this truncated form ADV. But again, you still may need to register with the state. That's the part that I think a lot of people miss, is that they say, well, I'll file my ADV, I'll be an ERA, and I'm just exempt. I don't need to worry about anything beyond that. But depending on where you're organized and what state you're in, there may be additional qualifications. At a minimum, there's going to be a notice filing that's filed with the state, but some states might also require you to, might also have other registration requirements. So that's something to, just to keep in mind. And again, each state is different. Several states follow the model, the private fund model rule adopted by the NSAA, whereas other states don't follow it at all, and some states don't even have registration requirements. So there might be, certain states, I think, just off the top of my head, I think like Arkansas doesn't have any rule like that. So those are some things to consider as you go into that.
So some homework, if you're feeling good, just go look up your state's exempt reporting advisor laws. See what it says wherever you guys are at. So at this time, I'd like to open it up for just like open Q&A, legal compliance, hopefully on this topic, but it's pretty flexible. So just kind of raise your hand and we'll go from there. Hey, Nicole.
Hey, Marty. So I have a question. When you talk about checking out your state's exempt reporting advisor requirements, how would you really define that? So like in our example, I'm in Louisiana, my partner's in Texas, but our fund is a Wyoming LLC. So would that be Texas? Would it be Wyoming? Like what state are we really looking at? Or would it be all the states that we plan to get investor capital from?
So that's a great question. And I think now, with the way things are organized, it's hard to say. So typically it would be the state where your principal office is. If that's in Louisiana, then it would be Louisiana. If it's Texas, it'd be Texas. Where this fund is actually domiciled is not necessarily relevant. I mean, most of the funds I set up are Delaware funds, and nobody's registered in Delaware. It's typically where you have your primary office. There's also a de minimis registration requirement that some states have, meaning if you have more than, X number of states, it's usually 5, and some states like Louisiana, it's 15, then you might also need to file something there as well, at least a notice filing or something. Louisiana is a little different because you're kind of in luck. It basically excludes from the definition of an investment advisor anybody who has less than 15 clients in Louisiana. So you are probably okay there without having to worry about filing, at least with the state, other than a notice filing. So.
Okay, thank you.
Oha, I know you got some good questions.
Okay, I'm just trying to word it correctly. So I have clients that are sitting GPs on another fund and they're launching their own fund. So do they qualify under like an umbrella of total AUM, or can they, while they're launching their fund, can they qualify to be an exempt reporting advisor under the current fund's AUM, or is it like total aggregate?
So I guess it will depend on how they're set up. Typically, when I set up funds, what I'll do is I'll have we'll set it up just if you follow like an LP-GP structure, you'd have the limited partnership and you would have a GP, but the GP is unique to that fund. And then we have an investment manager, which is the GP outsources this sort of investment advisory roles to that investment manager. So the GP isn't licensed, but the investment manager is that's the entity that would either be the exempt reporting advisor or the investment advisor. And so then in that situation, I would look at, okay, how many funds or how much assets under management does it falls under that investment advisor. So if they have 3 funds and the total of those funds puts them over 150 million, then they would definitely need to register with the SEC. But so I would aggregate the sort of the total number of assets under management that they have between all of the related investment entities.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Going, man. I saw your message in the chat. I'll just read it out loud. So Voss is interviewing people for his board. It's his 3rd fund. One person is not a U.S. resident or a citizen. Can they be a part of the GP, and maybe what are the consequences of doing that?
Sure, I don't see any problem with that. Especially you've got in that situation, I don't know what the sort of the licensing steps you've taken if you're, licensed as an ERA, if you're licensed under the state. So there might be just some disclosures about who's involved, but there's no prohibition against non-US citizens being, providing advisory services. They just, or at least being part of an advisory group.
Well, this is Bass. I guess I was wondering, can they be a GP of a fund, though, of a private equity fund, like a 506c fund?
Just be the sole GP?
No, they'll be part of the GP board.
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem at all.
Okay.
There might be and one thing to think about too, with regards to this filing, right? The ADV, you're filing on behalf of an entity. It's not a person, right? So the exempt reporting advisor or a registered investment advisor is not a person. It's an entity. So they could be part of that entity, right? So say the GP qualifies to be an exempt reporting advisor. That's fine. That's the entity, and it wouldn't be the person. You might have to disclose on your ADV you will have to disclose on the ADV who's involved with that. But again, that's not going to be, it's okay if you have non-US persons on that.
Well, I was just wondering from a perspective of, sorry for the follow-on question, but I was wondering from the perspective of just a regular fund that is, say, a real estate fund, and that has multiple GP members. One of them is not a resident or a U.S. citizen, therefore, technically does not have a work permit to work in the U.S. Right? So they're based in Europe. So can they actually be, actively owning real estate and all these type of things and basically working in the US for the fund? I was just curious on that, if that's come up before.
There's probably some like
Yeah.
immigration law stuff and employment law stuff that I just don't know, but I'm so really just you're getting what you're paying for here. I apologize, but
It's okay. Okay, just
but
curious.
I don't think there's any prohibition. I mean, they're them providing services for an offshore entity, how they're compensated. They might have to, depending on if they're, if they're getting a K1 distribution or if they're getting a,
Got it. Okay, cool.
there might be some US tax consequences. And if they own, if there's some sort of in-kind distribution where they end up owning part of a property, there might be some additional tax issues that come into play, like FERPTA. So I don't know. It's not like a no, but there's some issues that
It
might
sounds
arise.
like if it's not cut and dry, so we'll follow up with our attorneys. I appreciate it, definitely.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you.
problem.
Thank you.
Oh, you got another question, Ola?
I do, but maybe we can answer Richard's question first.
Oh, okay, great. Richard says, I want to become a broker dealer. Should I do a Series 7 and a Series 66, or will a Series 63 and a Series 65 be enough? So he wants to become a broker dealer. What licenses should he get?
So definitely a Series 7. And each with and I'm not, this is sad. I'm gonna like pull up the licenses. I can't remember, but I think a Series 66 and a 7 is sufficient. A 63 and a 65 allow you to provide investment advisory services rather than broker dealer services. And the kind of the distinction there is a broker dealer license allows you to go raise capital. You're basically being hired by the company to raise capital for them. I'm a company, I want to raise capital. I'm a fund, I want to raise capital. I hire a broker dealer to raise capital for me and I pay them that. An investment advisor is the opposite, where your client is not the company, your client is the investors. And the investors saying, here, I am giving you my money and I want you to go place it or invest it for me, and I will pay you a percentage based upon, I'll pay you something for that service. So who you kind of have to look at who your clients are or customers. Are they the investors or are they the issuers? A broker dealer works on behalf of an issuer, and an investment advisor works on behalf of the investors.
Richard, did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. That nailed it. Thank you.
Awesome. Ola, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in really quickly. Sorry. So, and there's a lot of fun literature out there in regards to charging a management fee and having a Series 65 license. There's some literature that I found that you can bypass the Series 65 license and still charge a management fee with the CFP, which is a Certified Financial Planner license. So we were wondering, both Ryan and I were actually wondering, like, what is the correct practice out there? What are the do's and don'ts in regards to that? Because it's out there and I don't want any confusion for anybody, really, including myself, really.
So I'm not super up to speed on what a CFP can do. I know that it's basically that same idea, right? Where you're paying them a fee to go out and help you invest your money, right? But I don't think that necessarily would work for a fund manager. I can see that as being like in lieu of like an invest. So, and Ryan and I have had this discussion. Trying to fit funds and fund management into the investment advisor, into the, the square peg of funds into the round hole of investment advisory laws. and the Investment Advisor Act is been kind of a chore. The Investment Advisor Act was designed for people that were investment advisors. You give me your money, I'll help you put some money in bonds, and some in stocks, and some in mutual funds, and some in T-bills, or whatever it might be. And that's my job, and I get paid a fee for doing that. You pay me a couple percentage points, and maybe I get some sort of upside. That's the traditional investment advisor, and the Investment Advisory Act and most state investment advisory acts were drafted around that. It's only with the passage of Dodd-Frank that the rules changed and basically said, if you're a fund manager, you need to be, you're providing advisory services. So a CFP looks more like a traditional investment advisor, but it doesn't look at all like a fund advisor. So I don't think, for purposes of this call and this group, I would give that advice to say you can do that. I think that that's something completely different.
Matthew, how's it going, man?
Good, thank you. I just had I had my phase 4 coaching call today, and you graciously recommended I transition more to a 506C style model in order for me to raise capital from outside my network. So I guess my first questions was actually kind of around the Series 7, if that's needed to kind of just perform general solicitation, or how that works.
And is this is for
a real estate fund?
Okay, so the Series 7 would only be required. We talked about this a little bit last week. You'd only need to be licensed as broker dealer if you're providing capital raising services on behalf of somebody else. Mm-hmm. There's what's called an issuer exemption, where you can go out and raise capital for your entity. If I have a fund, I'm the GP of a fund, it's part of my job is to raise capital for that fund. Even if it's direct solicitation, I'm not required to be licensed. I can go out and raise capital for my fund. Where it comes into play is if you're raising capital for somebody else, then in that broker dealer license is required.
Okay, and I take it there's literature out there on, still the do's and don'ts, even if you're using an issuer exemption. I imagine you still have to follow kind of the guidelines of SEC law, or?
Yeah, well, sort of the do's and don'ts are, again, if you're doing a 506C, you can generally solicit. You can do internet ads. You can post on Facebook. You can put a billboard up. You can, there's not a lot of limitations to what you can do. Where you need to be careful is you still have to comply with securities laws, in that you can't say anything that's misleading. You can't say anything that's fraudulent. You can't, a material misrepresentation. You, should avoid being promissory. You can't say, hey, this fund is going to, we're going to give you 10x return. You should avoid anything that sort of implies success, showing on your literature, having an arrow that goes up and up, or dollar signs, or big, I've seen people send out things with big piles of stacks of cash. All of that stuff would be frowned upon, because it's you're being promissory and potentially misleading. So those are the rules. Those aren't those are just sort of general rules to live by.
Okay, fantastic. And then I guess a follow-up question, that kind of, if you don't mind, circling back to the management fee as well. So I'm looking at the state laws where it says that Missouri basically modified the NASA exemptions, where the beneficial owners have to be a qualified client or as an accredited investor. Does that mean, like, if we wanted to charge the management fee, myself and my partners of the investment advisory subsidiary would have to be qualified clients?
So
I can post the language in
so Missouri, I think they do follow a modified rule, and it basically, I think it's an either or. You'll have to check, but I think it's you either must be a qualified client or an accredited investor that qualifies under an accredited investor, except for I don't think it can be the income test.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I just want to hop in real quick and provide some basically a tip I used when I was raising money for a 506c. There's services out there that help with investor accreditation process. So if you're generally soliciting, you can only, for a 506c, you can only work with accredited investors only. But you have to verify that they're accredited. And one of the things that we found that was super easy to reduce the friction, people have to prove that they're accredited. And so either that's through taxes or bank statements. But the smoothest way that we found was you have a verification letter that can be signed by their CPA or attorney that verified that they're accredited. Because people that are super high net worth don't want to share that information. So that accreditation verification letter from their CPA or attorney was the best path forward. So just want to throw that in there. Olha, let's jump over to you. Oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. There you go.
So I have a client who is who has a course on the side where he teaches options and forex and whatnot, teaches trading. His attorney recommended that he gets a Series 7 in order to be fully, in order to talk about it freely, in order to talk about certain tickers and certain, I don't know, trades. So to fully protect him, his attorney said to take a Series 7 test, and I believe he was taking it like 2 weeks ago. So do you agree with that? Because he's just talking about it. He's not technically recommending any specific stocks. Wouldn't then he need to get a 65 for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Series 7 is like the most broad securities license. It allows you to do, to solicit, purchase, sell securities on, behalf of others. So if he's, maybe, it kind of depends on how he's being compensated. If he's making recommendations for investments and he's being compensated by the issuer to make those recommendations, then yeah, he should have a Series 7. If he's being compensated by, the people that he's talking to, if they pay him a fee to provide this advice, or even if they don't, I mean, if he's providing that sort of investment advisory advice, then it would be better for him to have a Series 63 or 65 and be licensed as an investment advisor. So,
teaching different tickers. So for example, during one course, he'll be just talking about Tesla trade. So obviously he's devoting a lot of attention to Tesla, but Tesla is in no way is compensating him by any means. So just for future reference on anybody that would like to use, I know Bridger definitely has us talk about different things online and have podcasts. So just for reference, for anybody that would like to talk about specific tickers in reference, not even recommendation.
Oh, got it. Any other questions? Awesome. Kelly, I know we met in Salt Lake and you were doing a Reg CF. I'd love to hear how that's going. So Dan Doxey is out. He's in Japan for the next few weeks with his whole family. How awesome is that? He asked me to fill in for his office hours on Friday. So I'm pretty excited because I'm bringing on one of my good friends, Layla. She is the CEO and founder of My RIA Lawyer. And she is the expert when it comes to setting up registered investment advisors and exempt reporting advisors. So when I was going and shopping around, I found all these like cheaper options for like, $200, $300 to manage your compliance, whatever. Like I didn't buy it at all. So on my previous team, my advisors, my board members, there was probably a combined net worth of, I don't know, 300 million. And I want to make sure we're doing it right. So I got with Layla, and she sets up everything and helps you from chief compliance officer outsourcing to setting up your exempt reporting advisors. She's the person. So she's coming on next week to talk, or on Friday at 10 Mountain Time. It's on the calendar to talk about all this. So that's what's going on this week. Marty, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. We're going to be doing this Tuesdays, 1 p.m. Eastern time. And yeah, thank you guys. I think that's it.
And I will, I'll put, if anybody has any other questions, I'm just going to drop my email in the chat. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys.
All right.
See
Thanks,
you
everyone.
Friday.
Thanks, so.